Hello everyone, welcome. So it's been a minute and we have a lot to catch up on. I feel like there's a lot that I need to catch you all up on, and there's so much that I still need to catch up on because there's so much going on in the book community all the time at this point, and I never really know what's going on anymore because I am not online very often. But there's stuff that I've been doing that I want to share with you all, and also certain topics I've been hearing about that I feel like would be fun to discuss with you. So we will get to those things eventually. But today I want to do a wrap up of all the books I've been reading recently, because I've read, I think, about 15 or so books in the last couple of months, and I have a lot to say. I found some gems and also some books that make me want to rant. So we're going to be discussing all of that today, and I'm really excited. Before we get into my wrap up, I do want to thank the sponsor for today's video, which is Book of the Month. Book of the Month is a monthly bookish subscription service that brings a brand new hardcover book to your front door every single month. Every month they have a curated selection of brand new books for you to choose from, and if you are not interested in any of the books that month, you can always skip and just wait until the next month, which is really convenient. But my favorite thing about Book of the Month is their very affordable pricing. If you use my code CANDY, you can get your very first book for $5 plus a free hat. And the hats are super cute. I have this one that says well read, and this is actually my very first baseball cap. I'm not a hat person, but I might be after this because I love it. The two books that I chose for October I'm really excited about. The first one is Hazelthorn by C.G. Drews. This is by the author of Don't Let the Forest In, which I have been told to read countless times, but I'm very, very excited for this one as well. It seems like it'll be the perfect horror eerie vibe for October. And then my second pick is Red City by Marie Lu. This is a fantasy book with an alchemy-based magic system, which is one of my favorite things. So I'm very excited to try this one out as well. I feel like both of these books are kind of perfect for fall. I'm in a very fantasy mood lately, which has been so great, and I'm really excited to pick both of these up. So if you're interested in trying out Book of the Month for yourself, be sure to use my code CANDY and get your first box for $5 as well as your free hat. All right, but now let's get into my wrap up of all the books I've read recently. Like I said, there are some great books, and then there are also some books that I hated. I absolutely hated. I also have DNF'd like maybe 4 books this year already, which is a lot for me. I do not DNF. I used to be very much like I am committed to the end. I don't care how much I hate this, I have to finish it. But lately, anything that like even remotely bores me, if I'm halfway through and I'm not into it, I'm not gonna finish that book. So that's been my new policy. And even with that, I have still read a ton of books. So I think it's working for me. I think it's getting me out of my reading slump because I've been pretty consistent for the past couple of months. All right, so starting off with the last book I read before I updated you all, and what is probably still one of my favorite books that I have read all year, and now just a new all-time favorite, that is Giovanni's Room. If you watched, I think my most recent vlog where I was trying to find a 5-star read, this was a book I was considering reading in that video, but I read a 5-star book before I got to this one, and I read this one immediately after I finished that book, and I am obsessed. I'm also in a book club with some friends, and I told them that I had just finished this book and they seemed really interested in it. So then we also read it for the book club and discussed it in the book club. So I did reread parts of it as well. It's like very marked up. I have gotten super into annotating my books this year. It's kind of all I do. If I have a physical copy of the book and I'm enjoying it, I will be writing in it. I will be highlighting things. I adored this book. I understand why people say that it's one of the best books of all time, why it's one of their favorite books of all time. I would now put it on my A Clockwork reading list, which I really do need to do an updated version of that. The prose is beautiful, the story is beautiful. There's an entire passage in here about cleanliness that I think is one of the best things I have ever read. There's just so much to say about this that I could not possibly fit into like a 2-minute segment in here, but it has very much encouraged me to read more by James Baldwin. I will definitely be picking up some more of his work, his nonfiction as well as his other fiction, and I'm very excited to see where they all rank for me. Is this gonna stay my favorite one? Is a different one gonna end up being even better than this? It's hard to beat this, but I believe that he could do it. And this is obviously 5 out of 5 stars, 6 out of 5 stars if we're being honest. This will definitely be on my favorites list at the end of the year. So the next book I read is one I've had on my shelf for like 2 years now, and I just never picked it up. I'm actually in like multiple in-person book clubs now. I've been doing a lot of in-person book club reading, which has been really good for my reading, but it's also getting me to read things that I wouldn't have read slash slash read things that I've been putting off for a long time. One of those book clubs is a romance book club that I'm in, and the book that we read was Legends and Lattes. This, again, has been sitting on my shelf forever, and I was so excited to read it. When it first came out, the reviews were glowing. Everyone was saying it was really amazing, so I wanted to read it so bad, but then I put it off for so long. The hype kind of died down, but we read it for my book club, and I didn't really like it. It is not a bad book by any means. It's just very much purely cozy fantasy romance. Almost nothing happens. So if you like no plot, just vibes, which I usually do, don't get me wrong, that is very much my type of thing, but I don't think I'm as much into like these kinds of cozy books, the cozy aesthetic, whatever you want to call it. I feel like I need a little bit more tension, not even necessarily action. It can be internal tension, but there just wasn't that much going on in this book, so it wasn't very enjoyable to me. It was decently written. I had no problem with like the writing of the book, but the romance was barely there, and again, like pretty much nothing happened. This I just think is not my type of thing. Again, not a bad book, totally understand if you like it, but at this point I am not really into just those like super chill, nothing happens types of stories. I definitely want a little bit more. So I gave this about 2.75 out of 5 stars. Again, not bad, just not really my thing. Okay, and then in a similar vein, I read another kind of cozy romance, but this was one of my most anticipated releases of the year. And that book is A Witch's Guide to Magical Inkeeping. This is by the same author who wrote The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches, which is every time I say that I laugh, which is one of my favorite, if not my favorite, romance book. And I just love that book. I think it's so good. That's the perfect amount of cozy, but there's still enough plot and enough tension going on that it keeps me engaged. This book is definitely much lighter, I would say, than Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches. There is less happening. It's less intense. Not that that book is very intense, but it's much cozier. So it was an enjoyable read as well, but I wasn't obsessed. Unfortunately, I thought I would like this a lot more, but again, I think I'm just kind of either not in the mood for this type of story, or I think it's just not my thing. I think I'm just not that interested in cozier stories, especially since I'm like very into gothic horror at this point and like more intense fantasy stories. I think I'm kind of veering away from stories like this one. But again, it was not bad. It was very sweet and heartfelt. The found family in here was great, and I enjoyed that element of it. The writing is still fantastic in these books, but again, the story itself was just not my favorite. But I gave this like 3.5 to 3.75 stars. Still good, I would still recommend it. I just don't think I would ever read it again. Next up, I was apparently on a cozier romance reading streak, but this is another book that we read for my romance book club that I'm in, and that is The Secret Lives of Country Gentlemen. This is one of my friend's favorite books, so I was really anxious about reading it. It's always stressful if you don't like one of your friend's favorite books, you know? But unfortunately, I wasn't the biggest fan of this. This is a queer historical romance novel that also kind of has like a cozier vibe. This one definitely has more of a plot going on than Legends and Lattes. The stakes are higher. I think these are just books that are not my thing. They're just not my thing, and that's fine. They're not bad, and the characters were interesting. I liked some of the side characters a lot, actually, but the story itself was just not that gripping. I think part of it is that I read something as unbelievably good as Giovanni's Room like a little bit before all of these books, and then it was really hard to compare anything. And I know I shouldn't compare, they're not trying to do the same thing, the books are not the same, but again, I think that I'm not a cozy romance person, which is like weird. I feel like I used to be. I'm just not anymore. You change, your tastes change. You're just not always gonna like the same things anymore. Who knows, like 5 years from now, I might exclusively just be into cozy romance books. But for right now, just not super into them. Again, this is not a bad book, but it's just not my type of book. So I gave this 2.75 out of 5 stars. Okay, next up I have a nonfiction book, and this has weirdly been a year for me of reading a lot of nonfiction. I don't know what is with me right now, but there was like a period of time where I couldn't read a fiction book and I could only pick up nonfiction books. So you'll notice that a little later in this wrap up. I've been reading a lot of nonfiction, and I've been really enjoying the nonfiction I've been reading. And this is definitely one of my favorites that I've read this year, and that is Fugitive Feminism by Akawugo Emejulu. It's been a long time since I've read theory, and also a really long time since I've read any new theory. This was published in 2022, so this is very recent. I really enjoyed it, and I forgot how much I enjoy reading theory. This has been honestly one of the books that has stuck with me the most throughout this year. I keep thinking about it in tandem with everything else I read and everything else I watch and all the media and art that I consume, and that is how you know that something is good. That's how you know that it sticks. But it's a manifesto essentially that proposes the idea of abandoning humanness as a category, since the term human inherently implies a non-human category, and she's specifically talking about like Black feminism and Black women and how historically and presently they have been placed into this non-human category. So she is kind of theorizing about this idea of abandoning human as a category and redefining what it means to be. And I really, really loved it. This is also super marked up. I literally sat in a bookstore while I was waiting for an appointment and read almost the whole thing. So yeah, I really, really enjoyed it. And again, like I said, I keep coming back to it, citing it whenever I have conversations with people. And yeah, it's just constantly on my mind now. So it was very interesting, very thought-provoking, and again, super great to go back to reading theory and great to read some more nonfiction. I don't really know how to rate this. I think I gave it like 4.5 stars on Fable and Storygraph. This is not the type of book you can really give a star rating to, but I did enjoy it and I would recommend it. So there's that. All right, next up, I read The Bewitching by Silvia Moreno Garcia. This was one of my book club picks and I loved it. I was so happy to love another Silvia Moreno Garcia book. All 3 of her books that I've read so far, I have enjoyed thoroughly. And this is still not as good as Mexican Gothic, which is still one of my favorite books I've ever read, but it's still fantastic and I highly recommend it. It's perfect for October. It's witchy, it's eerie, it's creepy and dark, but it is also kind of a dark academia book as well. I would definitely place it in that category, and it's so worth the read if you like horror and witches and stories told from multiple points of view throughout different points in history. I love that narrative structure, so I really enjoyed this, and I gave this 4.25 out of 5 stars. Next up, back to my nonfiction reading streak. I read The 100 Years' War on Palestine. I have perhaps a controversial take about this book, and that's only that this book is on everybody's list of books to read about Palestine if you want to know more about the history, and people always recommend it as like a great starter book. This is like a very academic text, and I think it's really hard to read if you don't know anything about this period of history already. I don't think it's a bad book. I think it was very informative. I learned a lot. However, I don't think it's a good place to start. There were so many times where I had to go look up what the thing that they were referencing was, because they don't actually explain it, because they expect you to already have the historical context for certain names or places or events, and I didn't have that historical context sometimes, so I had to do some outside research, which again is not a bad thing. That's always good, but I'm still glad I read it. I learned a lot, and I would definitely recommend it if you are interested in learning more. All right, then the next book I read was another nonfiction book, and that is Monsters: What We Do with Great Art by Bad People by Claire Dederer. This was very interesting. It's been like well over a month since I finished this, and I still don't know exactly how I feel about it. The book is pretty much exactly what the title says it is. It's a book about art created by quote-unquote problematic people and what we do with that art and how we consume it. What does that mean to consume art made by a bad person, to still love it, to still enjoy it? And she's kind of just like exploring this question, exploring this idea. There were sections of the book, certain chapters that I thought were really well done, and she was very much like getting to a point. And then we would kind of almost reach this point and then never actually get anywhere. Not that the book needed to have an answer per se, but we kind of never get to any sort of solution other than you should do what you want because it doesn't matter, because you're not personally responsible for bad people. The system should hold them accountable. You can't personally hold them accountable. And I don't know that I necessarily agree with that, but I also don't even know that that's what her thesis was, because I don't think she necessarily knew what her thesis was sometimes. There was also like an odd chapter that was about motherhood, female villains, and how women are vilified for things that men are not vilified for, mostly choosing their career over their children. But it was odd because it almost felt like in the book, specifically, someone like Joni Mitchell, who chose her career over children, was being compared to somebody like Woody Allen or Roman Polanski. And she specifically says, like, oh, I'm not trying to compare those two, but it was just like a strange chapter that was entirely about the female villain and how, like, being a mother or choosing not to be or abandoning that role of motherhood in any way is what makes you a villain. But at the end of the day, I really just don't think that this had all that much to say. I do think her thesis was essentially, you personally cannot hold these horrible people responsible, so you may as well still enjoy the things you enjoy without monetarily supporting them. Which is kind of just the same argument you hear online regurgitated 1,000 times anyways, so I don't know, I didn't really get anything from this other than a lot of confusion. Again, my biggest gripe is that I feel like she almost got to a point several times, but then backtracked, and then we never really got anywhere. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend this, but I am curious if any of you have read it. Please let me know what your thoughts are on it, because I feel like this is the type of thing I need to discuss with people. Also, you will notice that I don't think I have the physical copies for any of these remaining books because I have been doing a lot of Libby reading lately. So yeah, the library and me are like this, but yeah, that's why I don't have physical copies of any of the rest of these. But anyways, the next book that I read is actually a reread technically. I read the uncensored picture of Dorian Gray. So this is different than the final published version that is the most common one that you'll see published everywhere. This one is actually shorter than the traditional version, and it has certain uncensored scenes and certain language that was changed in that final version. So this was a reread for me, which I read for a book club that I'm in. I enjoyed it as always. This is still one of my favorite classics, and I think I have to reread the other version again to compare them and see which one I like more. But honestly, I think I might like the final version even more than the uncensored version. But that's not set in stone. All right, next up, I read a book that I was very excited about that I thought I would absolutely love, and that is Slewfoot by Brom. This is a witchy set in the 1600s Puritan era, Salem witch trials era book about a character who is tried as a witch. I really thought I would love this because I kept seeing this on TikTok, and this is my final straw, okay? This is finally the last time I ever take a recommendation from Book Talk ever again. I've never ever liked a single popular Book Talk recommendation that I've seen, and this is definitely not super mainstream, but I kept seeing this like several months ago and I was so intrigued. I really wanted to read it, and I'm so glad I got this from the library because if I had owned this, I would have been so upset that I'd spent money on it. It's not that bad. I, however, did not like it. This was one of those situations where I was halfway through reading the book and I kept getting this vibe that this had to have been written by a misogynistic man. I didn't know who the author was because the name is just Brom, which is clearly a pen name, but I didn't know if they were a woman, a man, non-binary. Like, I didn't know who this person was. So halfway through reading the book, I just kept getting this vibe. I was like, the way that the female character is written, the main character is written, feels like specifically sexualized the way that misogynistic men sexualize women in books. There's something here that feels off to me. So I did what I always do whenever I get a weird vibe in the middle of a book. I researched the author. I looked up the author. I was right. He's like a 65-year-old white man with the strangest author bio I have ever seen in my entire life. Just go read his full author bio on his website. It's super long and there's weird stuff in there. You can tell me I'm being judgmental and rude or whatever. I don't really care. If I get a bad vibe from something, I'm not gonna waste my time reading it because I have free will and it's my time and it's my life. So anyway, I read about 90% of this book and then DNF'd it at the last 10% because, or actually like the last chapter, because I did not care. I was like, I literally don't care how this ends. I have no interest in it. So anyway, did not like this. I gave this 2.5 out of 5 stars and I'm very disappointed because I was really expecting and hoping to love this. All right, then next I read The Unworthy. This is by the same author who wrote Tenders the Flesh, which is the only book I have ever DNF'd because it genuinely made me so sick I couldn't keep reading it. It disturbed me so much I couldn't finish it. However, I do actually want to go back and finish reading that book eventually because I think now I would enjoy it more than I could have back then when I first tried to read it a couple years ago. So this is by the same author. This is a book about a dystopian future where this woman is kind of like keeping a diary as she is a part of this cult. I don't really want to say more about it if you want to read it because you kind of have to go into this without knowing a single thing about it and be completely surprised because it's very shocking, it's very strange. However, I didn't love this. While I found it interesting, it didn't really stick with me and it's not something that I would see myself going back to. It was just another book that I found to be kind of middling. I was unfortunately disappointed because I was really looking forward to this one as well. But again, just not my favorite. And I gave this 3 out of 5 stars. All right, then next I read The Serviceberry. This is by the same author who wrote Braiding Sweetgrass, which is also on my TBR for the rest of the year. I definitely still need to read that book. But I read The Serviceberry because I got it from the library. It came through before my loan for Braiding Sweetgrass, and I loved it. This is one of my favorite books I've read this year, easily, hands down. I need to buy myself a physical copy because I want to have it on my shelf. I want to own this. I want to go back to it. I want to annotate it. It's fantastic, and I can't recommend it enough. It's a very short and quick read, and it's about a gift economy, to reimagine the world that we have now, the economic system we have now, as a economic system of reciprocity. You give to the world gives back to you, and so goes on the cycle. It was one of those reading experiences where as I was reading it and after I finished it, I actually felt like a sense of hope, where I was like, oh my God, you know what? The future is bright. There is something you can do. I felt motivated, I felt inspired, and I love when a book can do that, especially nonfiction. So yeah, highly, highly recommend this. This is genuinely one of my favorite things I think I've maybe ever read, and something I will be going back to again and again. All right, next up, I read a book that has been on my TBR for a very long time and was on my 2025 reading list for this year, and that is Fahrenheit 451. I am so glad I finally read this. It's a dystopian classic that I feel like I was just missing out on something having not read it. I didn't love it. It's definitely not my favorite dystopian, but I understand why it's such a classic. It's incredibly relevant on so many levels. But then my biggest takeaway from this was that I realized how much of an inspiration it was for the Hunger Games. I had no context for anything that happened in Fahrenheit 451 other than the name, but after reading it, I understand how many little references and nods there are in the Hunger Games to this book, which was just really fun to pick up on as I was reading it. So that was the most enjoyable part for me personally as like a Hunger Games fan. I think it's something that I would have to do like a closer reading of to give my full in-depth thoughts on it. I read it in like one sitting, one afternoon, so I flew through it pretty quickly, but it's obviously a very timely novel, and I have to see where I would place it on my list of like dystopian fiction books I recommend. So we're on to the second to last book. This one is Weyward by Amelia Hart. As you can see, I've been reading a lot of witch books. Unfortunately, out of the 3 witchy, like eerier witchy books that I've read, which are the Bewitching, Slewfoot, and then Weyward, I've only liked one of them. And that was the Bewitching, because I did not like Weyward. This was another one of those situations where I was partway through the book and I couldn't shake the feeling that this author, if they themselves are not one, they at least subconsciously hold some very turfy beliefs. So this, similar to The Bewitching, is a book told in 3 different timelines from the perspective of 3 different women, 3 different points in history, all part of the Weyward family. And it's about womanhood and misogyny and violence against women, and a lot of it is about pregnancy and miscarriages, abortion. Like those are major themes. So like heavy content warnings if you ever decided to read this book, although I don't recommend it. It was very graphic and it was very dark. But that wasn't my problem with it. My problem with it was there's a specific way that people who are TERFs speak about being a woman. There's specific language they use about womanhood. You see it in whenever people are talking about like the divine feminine, or whenever they use any kind of like biological essentialist language or gender essentialist language where something is inherently feminine or inherently masculine within a person. And you can spot this most clearly in times when people are talking about women in pregnancy. They equate it to some kind of like magical, purely feminine experience that is like completely tied to your womanhood. Like when pregnancy is tied to how much of a woman you are, that type of language is very TERFy. This book used that type of language. I am not saying that this author is a TERF. I do not know her. I don't know her personal beliefs. All I'm saying is that this book used that type of language. And I was solidified in my belief when I got to the very end of the book, and the book ends with a quote from the author Adrienne Rich, who is a feminist writer, poet, but is also a known TERF. So I feel like I was correct. That is why I didn't like this book. I don't like when people tie womanhood, whatever they use to define that, to pregnancy when there's that kind of gender essentialist language involved. I am not a fan, ever. So I did not like this. I gave this 2 out of 5 stars. Would not recommend this one personally. I don't think it's worth your time. If you want a generational witch story from the perspective of a woman who is experiencing a lot of misogyny and is forced to confront that constantly, read The Bewitching. it's 10 times better, and you're not gonna get any of that kind of language. All right, and then lastly, the most recent book I finished reading is Vampires of El Norte. This is a historical romance fantasy novel. This is much more romance than I thought it was. Originally, I thought this was kind of more like the Bewitching, that was more just horror fantasy based. It's not purely a romance, but it's very much a romance. The romance drives the plot. So I had to rewire my brain as I was reading it to readjust my expectations for a romance novel and not to be expecting like gory horror, even though we do get some like gore and horror in this as well. And I enjoyed it. It's not my favorite, mostly because I didn't love the writing. It was extremely repetitive at times. Within like the first 3 chapters or 4 chapters, the author repeats that these characters have been separated from each other for 9 years. A million times. I will never forget that they spent 9 years apart because of how many times she says that they spent 9 years apart. It was a little bit excessive. So it was stuff like that. It was also in the descriptions of how the characters smelled. She described the characters smelling like sunshine, like at least 3 or 4 times in the book. That's why it stuck in my head. So certain descriptions, certain phrases were just very, very common and very repetitive, which is why I didn't love the writing. But apart from that, the romance was enjoyable. There was a little bit of a miscommunication element that I thought was a little exaggerated, but for the most part, it was fine. And the vampires were creepy. It's a perfect Halloween romance novel if you're looking for something that's creepier and leans into that vampire gothic horror type of fiction, but you still want a romance book. This is definitely a good one, and I'd recommend it for that. The romance I enjoyed. The writing just wasn't my fave. So I gave this one 3.25 out of 5 stars. But there you all have it. That is it for all of the books that I have read recently and all my thoughts on them. Like I said, it's a pretty good wrap up, a good mix of different types of things. Genres are all over the place. The ratings are all over the place. I read some of the best things I've ever read and also some books I very much did not enjoy. I hope that you got some inspiration and maybe got a couple recommendations out of this. But please let me know in the comments down below if you've read any of the books that I mentioned in this video, what your thoughts are on any of them. Also, if you would like to join my book club on Fable, we are reading Blood Over Bright Haven for our October book this month, and I'm very excited because this is one of the top fantasy books I have been wanting to get to, and so I decided to make it my book club book, so I finally pushed myself to finish reading it. So if you'd like to join us, we'll be reading this all month long. If you want to join the book club, the link is in the description box. It's just on Fable and it's free to join for anybody who would like to. And that way you can also participate and give us your input on what you would like to read for November, because I will go back to doing polls in November so you guys can have a say in what we read. But if you'd like to keep up with me anywhere else, all my links to my social media are in the description box as always. But thank you all so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!